Good morning everyone. I am Dilshana and I'll be presenting the paper titled Quality and Quantity Parameters for Developing Urban Design Regulations for Public Open Spaces in Kerala. My co-authors are Architect Ashwina T and Architect Nirmal Chandi. The need for the study. Open spaces have emerged as the beating heart of resilient cities. It can mitigate climate change through carbon capture and flood mitigation. As Kerala undergoes rapid urbanization, the policies governing these open spaces becomes critical. Comprehensive understanding of Kerala's urban dynamics is essential to address the issues. The research focuses on analyzing policy frameworks that guides open spaces in Kerala and to derive a framework to address the issues identified from the analysis. The paper also aims to identify whether there are sufficient open spaces and appropriate design framework for regulating these open spaces. Objectives of the research. The first objective of the research is to understand public open spaces from theories and derive quality assessing parameters. The second objective is to investigate and evaluate the current policy framework governing public spaces in Kerala to identify gaps. The third one is to develop framework for open public spaces that will align with the cultural and geographical context of Kerala, promoting the effective use of public spaces. And the fourth one is case examples. The first objective is to identify the parameters for open spaces. Across decades, authors have mapped several parameters for ideal open spaces, and drawing on their perspective, this research have identified three major parameters for open spaces, and they are architectural character, functional character, and contextual character. And the sub-parameters are accessibility, attractiveness and appeal, purposefulness, activity and uses, safety and security, maintenance, comfort, and inclusiveness. The second objective of the research is to analyze the policy frameworks in Kerala. The National Urban Development Policy have mentioned only about the importance of open spaces. The Town and Country Planning Act have not mentioned about the quality of open spaces that have to be maintained. The Environmental Protection Act have focused only on the eco-sensitive zones and its protection. The Forest Conservation Act have mentioned about the conservation of protected forest, and National Heritage Protection Act have focused only on open spaces surrounding the archaeological sites. Next, at national level, the urban and regional development plans for formulation and implementation guidelines have been referred, and it has only focused on open areas to be allocated per person. The assessing parameters such as accessibility, maintenance, inclusivity, and safety are all merely touched upon peripherally. These were the national rules, policies, and acts that governs open spaces in India. Now, within Kerala, the master plan analysis have been done for the metropolitan cities like Kochi, Kozhikode, Thrissur, Trivandrum, and Kannur. The master plans are trying to achieve the areas mentioned in the URDP-FI guidelines per person. But none of the cities have achieved the quality open spaces that have been mentioned in the URDP-FI guidelines. The Kerala Municipal Building Rule is also analysed. It have mentioned about the allocation of open spaces for each category in terms of setbacks and only considered the factor accessibility. Looking into the current scenario from the above analysis, it is observed that the acts and policies mentioned only about the importance of open spaces, while the URDP-FI guidelines mentioned about the open space requirement per person and few parameters like inclusivity, safety, maintenance, and accessibility, and the master plan areas as per URDP-FI guidelines are not met, though quantitative distribution of open spaces is based on norms and standards. These do not address the qualitative and management aspects. The quantitative distribution does not look into the larger ecosystems. Therefore, the issues existing are the need for the open spaces that is quantity, the regulations of open spaces that is quality, and maintenance issues. For achieving quantity, open spaces should be seen as part of a whole system and develop a comprehensive structure plan with all open spaces. For achieving quality, understanding literature to derive parameters and formulate guidelines, and to develop context-specific guidelines for existing and new developments. Maintenance can be achieved by developing and maintaining both existing and proposed open spaces. Methodology is categorized in three levels. At macro level, quantity is to be obtained looking into the overall landscape plan. At meso level, quantity has to be obtained within sector. And at micro level, quality of open spaces has to be maintained. Now looking into the urban issues and concerns in Kerala. Majority of the urban centers are located along the coastal area. We have urban areas, and urban areas in Kerala. And the main challenges are observed in urban areas, that is in large towns. These areas have inadequate open spaces, and the open spaces that do exist are in poor quality. At macro level, a structure plan has to be prepared, looking into the topography and natural features of the site. At meso level, Guidelines have to be proposed based on the population, based on the sector, based on geomorphology and degrees of urbanization. There are different types of permutation and combination of spaces that exist in Kerala, and guidelines have to be formed for each of these combinations. At micro level, several guidelines based on the parameters identified have to be formed, and these have to be implemented in the building codes. Now, moving to objective 4, that is to analyze the research based on a case example. Here, Kochi city is being selected for the study. The area has high population density and is facing several environmental issues. To develop a macro level structure plan, several maps have been layered to understand the vulnerable areas. These maps include topographic map, urbanization map, development pressure map, catchment area map, flood prone or disaster mapping, existing and conserved open spaces mapping, and watershed analysis. Based on the study, macro level structure plan has been formed. The low-lying areas are identified for natural water catchment and integrating recreational activities. The commercial stretch can integrate recreational activity, which thereby increases economy and permeability of land. Ecological corridors connecting open spaces are also proposed, which helps regain biodiversity, resilience, and better human interactions. For meso-level analysis, the CBD area is being selected for the study. This includes parts of MG Road, Broadway, and Marine Drive. These areas are represented as the heart of economic activities of Kochi city. They contain large open spaces, mixed-use development, and possess historic legacy. These are the character of the identified precinct. The precinct is bordered by Arabian Sea to the west and Metro Corridor to the east. Marine Drive to the west is part of a planned development and consists of mixed-use buildings. Broadway is a traditional market area and exhibits traditional typologies of buildings. The MG Road towards the east of the precinct represents high street typologies in Kerala with branded commerce. There is lack of open spaces within the Broadway market and the MG Road stretch. Majority of the people uses the open space along the sea edge in Marine Drive. Meso-level strategies were formulated to obtain open spaces within these three areas. These are the strategies proposed to provide open spaces in these three areas of the precinct. In Marine Drive area, breaking of plinth to connect the open spaces along the seaside with the major road. The market canal and its edge and the street itself can be treated as open spaces in case of Broadway. And at MG Road, smaller footprint buildings can be combined together to form larger footprint buildings to form open spaces in between the buildings and at the front yard. All these placemaking strategies will help to achieve adequate open spaces that is required within the sector. The guidelines proposed are connected pedestrian paths, appropriate ramps and stairs with proper design and material, building frontage which should be accessible from pedestrian street, incorporating cycle tracks and racks, open spaces at 5 to 10 minutes of walk, signage to be provided at the same level with same materials and fonts, open spaces to be well landscaped, interactive public art and water features, similar materials for pavement of walkways which should be aligned with the road, front setbacks to be 7 meter to 11 meter to provide open spaces, promoting common boundary, provision of public spaces within private development, 25% of built footprint should be designated as public spaces, car parking, loading or unloading should be planned away from the pedestrian or open spaces, incentives for providing terrace gardens for occupied areas on ground, open spaces which should be publicly accessible at all times, 1 seat per 20 square kilometer of public spaces, providing throw blocks for larger blocks from pedestrian streets. Secondary streets or throw links should be 4 meter to 7 meter in width and 10 meter in height, improving permeability of the street using appropriate material, providing high degree of visual and physical porosity, well-designed night lighting scheme, ground floor which should be provided with active functions, types of plants on streets and roof should be based on views and wind movement, covered public spaces should be of high volume and should be in proportion with its size, providing services like drinking water, toilets, Wi-Fi, phone charging, etc. And the open spaces should be shaded with buildings, trees, canopies, umbrellas and materials should not radiate heat. Sun shadow study have to be conducted to provide sufficient shade considering the peak hours. Frontage should be unobstructed, barrier-free design, variety of seating to cater different users based on age and physical abilities. Sufficient open spaces play a pivotal role in enhancing the well-being of both individuals and the environment. An examination of existing policies exposes a shortfall in open spaces coupled with subpar quality in those that currently exist. Additionally, there is an apparent absence of a thorough analysis concerning the requisite quantity of open spaces. The framework established in this research endeavors to rectify this by addressing both the qualitative and quantitative dimensions of open spaces. It is important to note that the paper specifically concentrates on the open spaces within the commercial typology of Kerala. However, the framework can serve as a foundation for defining open spaces across various typologies within the region. With this, I am concluding my presentation, thanking all of you for your valuable time and patience.